with Brandon Handley. Because you're already great at everything else, why not fatherhood too?
Hey there, and welcome to Fatherhood for the Rest of Us. This is Brandon Handley. I am the creator and founder of Fatherhood for the Rest of Us. I want to say thank you for choosing to spend your time with me today on Fatherhood for the Rest of Us. I also want to just encourage you, if you could, to go over to the podcast on iTunes, download it, subscribe to it, and leave a review if you have found any part of this at all to have an impact on your life. That will help others to find the show and listen to it and get the same type of enjoyment that you are out of it. Also, if you are a father and if you're looking for a place that you can go celebrate fatherhood or perhaps even share some struggles and get some advice or find some like-minded men, I strongly encourage you to stumble on over to Fatherhood for the Rest of Us, the private Facebook group, and ask to join. I'll let you right in. That's going to do it for right now, guys. And please stay tuned for today's podcast. So, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey there, Fatherhood for the Rest of Us. This is Brandon Handley, and I'm on with Sean McCoy, the creator of the Come to the Table podcast. Sean, I want to say thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
You're more than welcome, my friend.
I usually like to start these off with something kind of cool, something we can celebrate, help you celebrate today in your life. What can we help you celebrate today?
I just want to give praise for the fact that my kids are healthy, that they're continuing to grow as people. I have an oldest is in college, youngest is in first grade, and then my son's in between in middle school. And just that, despite the challenges of this life that as they happen, that they all three continue to grow and thrive in their own way. So definitely a praise in that sense.
Awesome. It's always great to be able to celebrate health. Right? It's a real simple one, but a lot of times we take it for granted, and until we recognize that we've got it in our lives and we have our health, and just say thanks for that, because the day could have gone a lot worse without it, and it's easy to take it for granted. So you've got this podcast that you've recently started. I'm a big fan of it. I think you're on episode 5, right? Episode 5. So 5 episodes.
We just dropped 7 this week. Okay. 5 if you don't count the first one. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit about the Come to the Table podcast. What inspired it? How you feeling about it?
Well, I can tell you the word I could tell you about how I feel about it is abundance. It's been an amazing journey in a very short period of time. It kind of came on my heart about 3 or 4 months ago at the very forefront, or took over what I was thinking in regards to doing it and actually getting it done, because I just felt like there was so much division out there. At least there was a representation of it. There were so many arguments out in social media or the news or out on the surface was just division. And back in September and August, you may remember, I'm in Houston and we went through Hurricane Harvey. And that was a seminal moment for me on a personal level, feeling that, seeing that, and being in the middle of all that, especially afterwards, and how people came together. And it just really showed and reemphasized something that I always had believed in, which was it really didn't matter, who you voted for, what your socioeconomic status was, education level, gender, color, creed. It really didn't matter. And the people around here came together and responded to that disaster in just such a way that really, I think, resonated with so many people. And as well as what happened in my backyard, and while I feel that was a reason, and I'm very proud to be from Texas and all that goes with that. To be fair, there were so many people from outside of Texas, all over the country, that came here. I ran into people that literally got in their cars and just drove here because they wanted to help serve and they wanted to be a part of it, from Georgia, California, Colorado, Oklahoma. You heard about the Cajun Navy, I'm sure, if you remember the story. But they came from all over, and it really was a testament to people and who we really are. And so I wanted a voice to be out there. I wanted there to be another story for people to hear, other than the negative and other than all the comment, all the get nowhere commentary that happens on social media and happens out there a lot of times. And just people like, oh, we can't talk about religion, we can't talk about politics, we can't talk about gender roles, because it just creates all this animosity and anger. And I thought, yeah, I think we can. I think we can if we come to it with an open and respectful and just in a loving heart, and understand that you're going to have something that's different. You may have a different opinion. You may think something's differently. And it may be even something you look at as a core value. But that if you can love them and you can listen to them and try to understand versus listening to them to just react. If I'm just if I'm listening to you say something about fatherhood and I'm just waiting to say, no, Brandon, that's not right. This is what's right. I'm not really listening to you. And
Sure.
so the idea was to literally invite people and figuratively invite them to a table and just have an open conversation about anything. We've had some amazing episodes. I think if I can say that, toot my own horn in a way, but it's really not about me. It's really about the guests and their willingness to talk.
Absolutely.
I have so many that are coming, including yourself, coming on to talk about fatherhood, including I have people that are coming on that are. I have a stepbrother who's gay. I have people that I've had out of body experience, folks, race, gender. I mean, it doesn't. And it doesn't have to be always serious at the same time. I have a friend of mine coming on to talk about music. I have a guy coming on who's a cattle rancher out of South Dakota, just to talk about what it's like to be a rancher and how they treat animals and beef, and that's something we hear about all the time. And oh my gosh, they're trying to kill us with hormones and antibiotics and stuff. So it's like, instead of just listening to these weird kind of superficial voices, let's talk to people that are actually living that and being a part of that, and then let them have an opportunity to have a conversation. And so it's gone amazing. It's really, as you know, it's such an amazing world. It's a simple world that if you meet people that you connect with and get to have on your show and get the word out and listen to what they're doing. And I think it's a big part of that is because we're looking at media and news and how we learn things is taking a big shift. And I don't want to go down the fake news thing, but I will say, I don't think it's fake news as much as it is, what's the intention of the news? The intention of the news, as we see it in mass media, is to get your attention long enough to get you to watch it so they can sell advertising space. And that's really what they're trying to do. And whatever it is that can do that, they're going to put out there.
Right.
And so I think what makes podcasting and what makes all the other stuff much more attractive, I think, to people, and why YouTube has taken off, is it gives people an opportunity to listen to a subject matter. And I'm not doing this to make money. I know there's monetization down the road that can happen and whatever, but you started your podcast. I started mine because it was on our heart and we wanted to do something and we wanted to get the word out there. So I think it's coming from a good place. And I think people resonate with that and they listen to that and they understand it.
Right. No, that's awesome. It's definitely, it sounds to me like it's a calling for you. Right. And it sounds to me like you're answering that calling.
Yes, sir.
And one of the things that I enjoy about you is that it's you're very open about your faith on it. But you're also, you're kind of shattering what I think a lot of people view as a Christian in terms of saying, hey, I really accept everybody for who they are. And I really love them for, what they're doing and who they are, because that's kind of what Christianity is, right? In a nutshell. But most people are expecting somebody who says that they're a Christian to come chasing them down with a Bible and say, thou shalt do this and no nuts. That type of thing.
Yeah, and you're right. And so just to put a little background, I mean, I was 32 when I got baptized. I didn't grow up in the church. Mm-hmm. I was an agnostic, and I saw that my whole life. I mean, you see people, and you're just like, the hypocrisy is what gets you. The hypocrisy is what you're trying to literally sell something, but put it almost in a business sense.
Right.
But you're not, if you don't believe in the product, if you've ever been a salesperson, if you're trying to sell something you don't believe in, people aren't going to buy it, even if it's the greatest thing going on. And the irony to that is, by our nature, Christians are fallen, we're fallen people, and we're going to make mistakes. And so we really are the worst salespeople for Christianity. We really are. And I'll say that. And it's like Mohandas Gandhi said that, he likes Jesus. It's Christians he doesn't like. And I think that's really what you're getting at. I think there's a lot of people that resonates with. And it's not that I'm any better. I put Jesus on the cross as much as anybody in terms of my own personal failings. But if I'm going to be a Christian, if I'm going to listen and I'm going to dedicate my life and accept him as my Savior, then I need to listen to what he's telling me in that book. And I just don't read in there hatred and vitriol and condescension and judging. It tells you explicitly, if you judge, then if you're going to ask for forgiveness, but you're not forgiving others, if you ask to not be judged and yet you're judging others, then you don't understand the gospel. And that's in there. So if people aren't doing that, and I'm not trying to call out my fellow Christians, I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's not my words. I'm telling you,
and that's just not your approach, right? Like, I mean,
right.
We can always kind of look around and see how others are acting, and we can make our own decisions as to whether or not we're going to act that way ourselves.
And to that, to that, one of the most prominent verses I ever came across when I first started becoming a Christian, there's a story with Peter, and it's with Jesus, and it's in John, and there's a guy down, and basically Peter comes up to Jesus and says, "Hey, there's a guy down the road, and he's I'm paraphrasing here, but there's a guy down the road, and he's driving out demons in your name," and Peter wanted to go down there and confront him and judge and like call him to the carpet. Well, if there's ever a person in history that could do that, it would be Jesus. If you're buying into the story, Jesus could be the guy to go down there and basically tell him what he's doing wrong. And Jesus says, "Don't go do that." He said, "Don't do that. If they're doing this in my name, then let it go." And if Jesus isn't going to run down and have it out with somebody, then who in the world am I to go down there and do that to somebody? And that's really, for me, as simple as it gets. And it really is up to me if I'm going to believe this, for me to be the Christian that I want to be, and not look over at you and expect you to be the Christian I think you should be.
Right.
It's just that simple for me. And I think but I do think there's a lot of Christians out there who think that way. They just maybe they don't have a podcast, or they don't.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not
Yeah.
yet. You're giving them courage to do so. One of your guests that you had on, was it Snodgrass? What was that?
Justin Snodgrass, his old Navy buddy of mine. Yeah.
Right on. So, we can hit on that too, your time in the Navy, but, what I appreciated about that one wasn't necessarily that, you kind of accepted he had a lot of, out of body experiences, and you guys had a conversation about that. And while I appreciated the conversation in and of itself, there was, I think, an admittance in there that you've given about having kind of like an out of body experience of your own, which if I caught it correctly, you hadn't even told your wife yet, right? But you were willing.
Yeah.
and what's funny is that like you had the courage to say that on your podcast with with another guy who you already knew had like kind of all these similar experiences, and it brought to mind myself. I recently had a similar experience, probably maybe five months ago, right? And I don't think I've ever voiced it, and in some type of fear. But I'm just going to go ahead and voice it now, because it's like anytime somebody else goes ahead and says it, you're like, well, I guess it's okay to admit it, like because you're still alive, and so I just wanted to share, like for one, I'll share mine just in order for you to like kind of talking about like an out of body experience. Mine was like it was kind of like a 2 or 3 week thing, right? It was just kind of like this crescendo. But there was this at one point where, I just was taking a shower, similar to yourself. I just gotten out of the pool, taking a shower, and I started to feel panicky. But then I thought about it really, like if you watch The Matrix, you've seen The Matrix, right? I mean, remember that part where he touches the mirror and he's just taking the pill. And it starts to go like this, and it just goes, and it starts. And it's exactly how I felt. And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm replicating," and that was it. And I just took a breath, and that was it. But it was just a really intense moment, and that's what I felt like. I felt like I was that mirror thing was coming up my arm, and I'm just all panicked. I couldn't breathe and whatever. But I only had the courage to share that because you shared your story. And I'm outside of, I'd love for you to share your story as well as when you said that, when you do that, is that almost intentional and a willingness to share who you are so that you're giving others courage to do the same?
Well, I think that is ultimately the big part. That's the big secret. If you feel like it's only you that's gone through something, that shame, it could be struggling with alcoholism, it could be struggling with pornography, it could be struggling with anything. The way, and I'll just use this in a general sense, the way that the other side keeps things at bay is by keeping it in the darkness and keeping it in the shadows. You're the only one, Brandon, that's ever done that. And if you tell anybody, they're going to lock you up. They're going to come call the paddy wagon. What do you mean you had this out of body? What do you mean you felt like the mirror was? That can't happen, because we all know if we touch a mirror, it's going to hit. If you touch it too hard, it's going to break. Right. You cut your finger.
Sure.
So that's. But there's this other part of life that we have to, that forces us almost to that reckoning table. Like, how do you explain any of this? And it's even, for me, it's kind of like, I believe a guy died. 3 days later, he rose from the grave. and he ascended to heaven, and he did so for my sins. I believe a guy walked on water. I believe that. To a lot of people, they're like, okay, that sounds crazy. Well, everything about life sounds crazy. As I look at it, you start to pull back. If the Big Bang Theory is right, and everything was shoved into this little ball. Every atom, every part of the whole universe started out in this little small ball, and then for some random reason just exploded, and has been doing so ever since, and expanding the universe. I mean, to me, there's something illogical about logic. There's something crazy that we've all kind of experienced. Those little moments of what they really mean. And I'm not trying to dictate it what it is. I just had to look into myself and find out what it is where the best argument came down for me to help guide my life. And then also understanding that you're not alone.
Right.
That's the part that gets us, no matter who we are, I don't care what you believe, that's one of the most debilitating feelings we have. And that I'm the only person that struggled with this. I think a lot of it, like what you're doing with your podcast, as a father, you're going through experiences and you're struggling, and am I the only dad that's ever lost his temper so bad that I can't even remember my own name? I'm so angry at this little, wonderful, beautiful person, but I can't even see straight, or I'm struggling with what to do, or how do I handle this?
Right.
In the part that gets us, and this isn't a Christian thing, this is a human thing, which I think is beautiful about your show. Let's pull back and stop acting like it's just other people,
right,
or that it's some fringe weirdo group and only they act that way. That is what allows that lie to persist.
right.
The lie around that, and that's why I was really motivated to come on your show. If I could do that in some way and take some of my experiences that could get somebody that's listening to say, okay, I as a father, I struggled with that. I think, am I the only one? Evidently I'm not. And then I can have the courage to say, I need help, or I can do it this way. I look at it in a different perspective. Because at the end of the day, we're trying as men and just as people, and I know we even say men, about the gender thing, not into that, but just as human beings, we try every day, we struggle. And I've been very fortunate to travel 29 countries last time I checked, and met people from all over the world, literally. And I don't care if it's in Beijing, I don't care if it's in Thailand, I don't care if it's in Guatemala or Bolivia or someplace like that. We're all fundamentally the same. We operate pretty much the same. The hardware is about the same. Some of the software is the same. And some of the software is a whole lot different. But if we can just continue to remember that if you're feeling something, chances are pretty good. There are going to be people that don't understand it at all. But there's going to be somebody out there, that does understand what you're going through. And just don't ever think that you're alone.
Right.
That's the big lie. And that if we can, it gets you to think, because now you're thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe I did.
I'll tell you, there was a couple moments. It was touch and go, brother. It was touch and go. So I mean, and I was fortunate enough to have surrounded myself with a group of men, also fathers, that I felt comfortable enough to reach out to and be like, this is what's going on, or they'd notice something in me, and I just said, hey, here's what's happening. And to be 100% honest about it, knowing that there was really no repercussion, right? And as soon as, and it wasn't even a matter of them understanding me. It was just a matter of them accepting what I said is what I said. That and what else could it be?
Well, and going back to Justin, so that's why I thought it is important. Justin's not a Christian, but Justin had these experiences. And so who am I to dismiss him for having that? And we do a reflection episode, and the one we did with my friend and pastor, Doug, he talked about his own, and this is kind of why I want to do that show, his own journey of saying, I've heard of these out-of-body experiences, but he's never given any kind of lip service, kind of like, okay, whatever. But it wasn't until he was forced to sit and listen to a person who's a dad. He's a dad. Mm-hmm. He's a guy you could be standing next to in the Walmart line.
Right.
And he's married and he's got a job. He's just Justin. And he had this, and now all of a sudden it takes on a little bit different perspective when it's a person that's experienced this versus this mythical, legendary, I've heard of somebody somewhere having experienced XYZ. And if we pull back and we shatter those barriers and shatter those misconceptions that it's just other people and not you, or just other things and not us. And I think that group, that fatherhood group, you have to have that too. I'm a big believer, accountability groups, small groups, people that you confide in, that you have to ask, hey, am I crazy? It's a legitimate,
Sure.
a legitimate question.
Sure. I think that, and so what the great thing about the group, well, first of all, we jumped past your shower experience. I just wanted
No,
to,
so it was a lot like yours. It was in the shower. And I went through this transition, and understand too, be comfortable with being uncomfortable as you challenge what you think, as you challenge all the way to your very core. I was going from an agnostic. Mm-hmm. Now I'm considering being of accepting Jesus as my savior, and I thought that was a punchline.
Okay? Sure, right.
I was like, oh, this Jesus, okay, Jesus, absolutely. Whatever. Mm-hmm. And now here I am, like I'm considering this in my mind, and it's racing, and I'm fighting with myself, and all that. I'm going, you're crazy. Well, I know I'm crazy, but it's this dilemma. And so I was at a gym, and I was in the shower after I worked out, and the water is going over me, like you were saying, and I just had this, and all I saw was this light, and I started going towards this light, and it was that where you're not dreaming, but it feels like a dream, and it doesn't mimic this world, and you start to think, oh my gosh, I'm really starting to lose it now. Is this really real? What in the world? Why am I going to this light? But I was so drawn to it, and felt comfort there, and wasn't afraid. But there was this other right brain, or left brain, whatever one it is, like, no, this isn't logical. This isn't of this world. And I don't think it was.
Sure.
And then in a moment that it was there, and then the next couple of moments, I got scared, and I pulled back, and I just kind of opened my eyes and got back to this world. And I felt like it was a missed opportunity. I felt like it was, I don't know where it was going to go, but it was a little glimpse, and kind of, but it stuck to me, and it stuck out to me, and it kind of was a little bit of to what I was doing in terms of this transition. Like, there's a chance. Is there a chance that there's more to this world than just what's sitting in front of us? And I'd always thought that, but that really kind of reemphasized it for me at that point.
And I think that on that podcast, you said you've always been trying to get back there, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I wish I could get back to where that was, because I would just jump into it. It reminded me, it was years ago, I was having this conversation the other day with my aunt, and Johnny Cash. There's some videos, if you go find him. There was a point where he felt like he went to heaven, and he came back to this world, and he said, I want to go back. I don't want to be here. And if you hear people talk about near-death experiences a lot, and if you read books, there's a book I read by Evan Alexander. He was a neurologist, and it's a proof of heaven about his near-death experience, and how he described it. And a lot of people that have that, most of them almost to a person, say, I wish I could go back to where that was. I don't want to kind of be here in this world, kind of stuff. And so and how do I discount that? How do I discount somebody's experience? I'm sure there's people that listen to what I'm saying, and some people might think, he's just making up, he's crazy. I don't know. I'm just telling you what I remember. You're telling me what you experienced, and I can't. I've just tried very hard not to dismiss anybody that tells me anything anymore that they've experienced. And that's a little bit to what we're doing on my podcast. Have a conversation and let them talk. Right. Don't dismiss. When you dismiss people, it's very destructive. It's extremely destructive in that sense.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And I think that, again, what I had to laugh about, though, was, you're doing the podcast, and it gave me courage to have that conversation with you. Yeah. And so I think that in of itself is pretty cool, that what you're already putting out there is giving other people the opportunity to be courageous. And I don't know that there's too many opportunities where you get to do that face to face with somebody too, because I'm sure there's other people out there that are listening that you're giving courage to. It just so happens that we connected just through Facebook, and it happened. It's all real happenstance.
Yeah.
But and it's just. I'm just kind of verbalizing here how funny it was that we both shared like a shower experience, but
right. Two guys who like actually never met. This is our first real conversation, and I think there's a beauty in that, Brandon.
Yeah.
That I would put out there, that don't allow that just because you don't know or you haven't met somebody. I just really believe that most people are good natured. We can mess up, we can screw up.
Sure.
And I get a little sideways with that. Well, we can't be perfect. It's not about that. To me, it's more having the courage to step out there and talk to somebody. Understand that most people aren't that much different. Are there some differences? Do we agree on the same, what's the best movie of all time? Probably not.
Right.
But even if we do, there's some commonality. There's probably a lot of things we do agree on. So I think just shattering that myth, and you said that, and there was another story. That's a little, that's a little bit of a different one, but another one that that I kind of want to talk about. One of the stories, we've done 2 episodes on race so far, and to me, when it's one of those subjects, it's very, I don't want to say it's near and dear, but it's a challenge we have as a society. It's a challenge we have as a culture, just as people. And it goes, and then the next step, right now, what's happening, the big movement into the Me Too thing with women and gender roles,
right.
and how women are treated. My second guest was my friend Kate Fogarty to talk about her experience around Me Too. These are very tough issues. I just did a podcast last night, a recording with a gentleman who's a Messianic Jew, who's Jewish and believes in Jesus, and we talked about the Holocaust. And I said these are extremely difficult conversations to have at the same time. But I've had more than one person tell me that from just the race episodes we've had so far, it's required them to take a step back and say, they think they know what they know, but they've said, I want to address this. I want to look at this in a little bit different way. Right. So to that, I mean, I'm not trying to evangelize. I'm not trying to get anybody to come to Jesus.
No, man, I really appreciate what you're doing.
And so, but it's on these other issues, if it can challenge you fundamentally on something like what you think about race or gender or homosexuality. I'm having my stepbrother on, who's gay. I'm doing a 2-parter with him of what it's like. I'm not gay, but he is, and so who am I? Right? Let's have this conversation and challenge kind of what we think we know.
Sure.
And unless we're willing to push that, and unless we're willing to bend a little bit, if you're just going to stay right here, I only think this, and I'm never going to change, and it's just this. I think you as a human being, you as a man out there, you lose the opportunity to be the best that you can be by just staying in one lane and just thinking it's just this way, it's just like this, and I can never ever change, or I shouldn't change, or my God, I can never give up what I think I knew as the right way of doing things.
Right.
I think you limit the opportunity for you to be the best guy, the best man, best father you could ever be. Sure.
I think that you kind of hit it there, where if you don't give yourself the opportunity to change, you never will, right? If you're not willing to step off the path of what you've known to be the best, and you don't give yourself an opportunity to know any different. No, I always question that too, just because different ways to do things. Does that make you better off? Is it almost better off to say ignorance is bliss? The less I know, the better, because that way I can just kind of stick to this, and it's good, right? And
there's a lot. There's a reason that saying is because you're kind of like, well, now that I know that, it completely changes your whole viewpoint.
Right. Yeah.
It does, and it doesn't. And that's the thing, is it's a challenge. The change may not mean that you're going to be more comfortable. That's the real. We have it in our society, in our country. We're kind of looking for I want the luxury, the easy. I want to find a simple way to do things. And I'm all about KISS. I remember when I was in the service, I've used it in my career, engineering aspects. Yes, there's a lot of value to efficiencies and keeping things simple. And I understand manufacturing and all that, not to get too part of that, but I understand streamlining processes and why there's a benefit to them.
Sure.
But not for the sake of just because you don't want to deal with certain things, or I just want to stay easy in the easy path. Because that's the other thing. Go back to the gospel a little bit. The gospel doesn't tell you that your life's going to be easy. It actually tells you in there it's not. Don't expect it just because I accepted Jesus, and so now tomorrow the lottery is going to hit, and every decision I make in life is going to be the greatest. That's not the deal. But there's some growth. There's an opportunity that I'll go back to Harvey a little bit. That was what made that situation so amazing on a human level, on a service level, and as a community, was the fact that it was this devastation is what made that possible. I just saw it with some friends of mine out in Montecito, out in California, with the mudslides. And you may have seen that briefly, where the whole town was wiped out. And a friend of mine kept posting on Facebook, and she was like, "This is the worst thing I've ever seen." But at the same time, there was this beauty in it of community. They had their phones shut off, and they had to talk to each other, and they had to work together.
Sure.
And all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, wow, I got to meet my neighbor, and I actually like them." And all I've ever done is wave, if that. And so,
right.
But you have to have that. So that struggle, embrace that struggle. It's kind of like the Navy, the famous saying that the SEALs always talk about is embrace the suck. There's some,
right.
You're not going to get the most out of it until you do. But then, like you said, then you're like, well, wow, it still sucks. I would have rather just stayed over here eating cheeseburgers and watching reruns of CSI or whatever else, and not have to worry about all this stuff. And I get that. That's part of our nature. We do. That's that struggle back and forth. But I just think you're not gonna become the best person you can be unless you embrace that suffering, embrace that opportunity, that crucible for you to grow as a person and as a man and as a father.
And I agree with that. And I think that even if you don't go through something, there's gonna be some suck, and you're gonna have to
Yeah.
respond to it, no matter who you are. And a lot of it's how you respond to it. You can determine whether or not you grow into it, and it becomes a part of you, or you can reject it, and all that jazz. I
Well,
mean,
and to that real quick, guys, it makes me think. So my wife has worked for Texas Children's Cancer Center for 25 years, and her and I met. I worked in the nonprofit world a lot over the last 12 years on doing different stuff, fundraising events, and serving on boards. The one thing that you hear a lot in terms of people that, especially in the area around whether it's a disease or certain acute situations that are traumatic, like either a loss of life or a disease or whatnot. Typically, the phrase you hear a lot is, "I never thought this could happen to me," and I always wonder about that phrase, because there's no reason in the world that it's not going to happen to you.
all right.
My niece is a double lung transplant recipient. Her name's Taylor. At 18, she got given basically a 50-50 shot to live for a couple more years. And at the same time, not only did that happen to her, but a few years later, my nephew, her brother, got testicular cancer. My brother-in-law, her dad, ended up getting skin cancer. I mean, there's no, if you're looking for fair, the only place I know to find it truly is in the dictionary. There's no way, there's no reason for it. And there's not enough. You don't deserve it. No, and deserves that word that I think really hinders us a lot. Nobody deserves for their kid to have cancer. Nobody deserves for their kid to have renal failure. Nobody deserves for their grandparents or their mom or dad to have the Alzheimer's or die in a plane crash. Nobody deserves it. And it's that part of us that I think, if you don't think you're going to suffer at some point, if you don't think you're going to be challenged as a man, challenged as a father at some point, well, you might be the luckiest man that I've ever met if you've never gone through something. It will come. Your time will come.
It's coming.
And to what you said, what are you going to do about that when it's your turn? When it's your turn on the anvil getting hammered, what are you going to do about it? And that's the beauty of life, though, is that you do have a choice.
Right.
You have an opportunity to respond. And that's what I think what's brilliant about what you're doing is it almost gives men a chance from a fatherhood standpoint to be a little bit preventative. If you understand anything, if you've ever worked on cars or understand maintenance, right, we all know a little bit of prevention is worth a whole lot more than the cure.
That's right.
So by listening to your podcast and listening to what you're doing and having that information in your brain, what I was alluding to earlier, it's planting that seed. It may not be today that you need this information, but I listen to what you're doing and I listen to things that you're putting out there, and I'm like, these are stuff that if you let it sit in now and you start to churn on it and you're listening, contemplating it, when it is time, you already have that and you can draw from that. And that's the point. It's like training. You would never expect in the military, you would never not go into a situation typically that you're not trained for.
Right.
That's why we do that. Why do you practice? So that when it comes time for the real execution, well, then you have something to go off of. But in terms of things like fatherhood and some of these other things around quote unquote being a man, or we don't train at all, or sometimes we just think, well, we'll just react. Right. And I would say that what you're doing is really great, because you're giving men a chance to practice, to just push themselves a little bit, what they understand and that kind of thing. So I applaud you for what you're doing on that side for sure.
I appreciate that. It's like you said though too. We don't come with a manual, not only for children. I didn't grow up with a father figure, so also not having that precursor.
Right.
It also made it a little bit more of a struggle for me, which is also another reason for these conversations, reaching out and talking to men like yourself, other fathers who are in the mix of it, just to be like, just kind of like a checks and balances saying, all right, what are you up to? What are you doing? And, how are you approaching fatherhood? And if you and I have similar backgrounds, or even if we, if somebody listening has a similar background to one of the guests, and they can say, oh, okay, cool. I'm similar to Sean, and I get what he's going through. I get where he's coming from, and I can get behind then a couple of these other ideas that he's displayed and actually put them into action myself. And it's also like you were saying earlier, I'm not the only one having these thoughts. Right. And so, if somebody out there is listening to this podcast and they say, again, hear you, and they can agree with what you're saying, then it encourages them to kind of take an action towards hopefully the better, or making a change that they want to see, I think is a good way to say it. I know that I had a conversation with a gentleman named Jason McKenzie. I was like, I don't know, I'm just trying to get better, or this, that, the other thing is, because you don't have to be trying better or worse, just be different,
Right.
change.
And I think if I can add into that just a little bit, what I would encourage people to do, and what I've always tried to encourage people to do, is don't listen to me, and don't. This isn't the school of Sean, the book of Sean,
right?
And it's not even the book of Brandon, or
it's not.
It's not like if I just say to myself, well, I need to go find out what Sean's doing and just do what Sean says, and as long as I do what Sean says, I'm going to be okay. Yeah, I would disagree with that, and what I would say is it's up to you to find your way,
right?
And take pieces of what you're saying and pieces of what I'm saying, and find your way, and pull all that, and take into account all those things, because you're going to have a completely different experience. You're going to have certain circumstances, like you're saying. You may have not had a father. You may have had a great father. You may have had a father who was terrible. He was overbearing. There's so many variables in that sense. And if you can find somebody who can help you chew some dirt, who's had some similarities, then maybe somebody who's different, and see what they did differently. Because you have the opportunity. The gift that we've been given is you don't have to listen to anybody.
Right.
You don't have to listen to anybody.
No.
You can just do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah.
Or if there are people out there that are willing to give the time to say, here's what I've learned, and if you can take from that.
Right.
And hopefully, I think what you're trying to do, and what I know I always try to do, is if I can get, especially with kids, right? If we can find some sort of way, if I can get you to avoid my mistakes. I did this over here, and man, I really wish I hadn't done that way. If I can get you to understand, maybe avoid that and just learn from my mistake, that's great. But even if not, are we preparing our children for their ability to take that hit and still keep going, and then learn from it, and what do they take from it, and being a guide, and then we start to see ourselves as fathers. And pretty sure you're like me in that sense. As you get older and as you become a father, you're going to see the value of that and why it is so important, why that role dominates so many things in our lives, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so the father figure, this idea, the whole, it's a, I don't care what you believe in or where you're from, it is a huge part of our existence. And so we have to, and I think it's a great responsibility. I think we need a lot more of what you're doing, and taking it seriously, and looking at it, and trying to be, and challenging ourselves, like you said, and building upon, so we can improve, or at least make progress, or at least redefine our viewpoint on it, so that we can, because we're affecting people's lives on the day to day. It's this really weird dichotomy for me of, yes, it's my life, yes, it's what I think, yes, it's just me, but things that I do impact other people. And it's a really interesting, no matter how hard I try, I'm going to make an impact on people, and then I can either be the guy that's a jerk all the time, or
sure,
try to do it a different way.
So I mean, you can have a good or a bad impact. What type of impact are you trying to have? And I think that, as far as I can tell, you're having a good impact. I want to say thank you for tuning into this podcast, and I hope that you're truly enjoying the guests that I have on today. I also want to make sure that you are aware that Fatherhood for the Rest of Us offers personal one-on-one coaching. If you are a father out there who's been afraid or don't know what the next step is to take for you and your ideal version of life, reach out to me. Let's have the conversation. We'll see if you and I are a good fit. And if you are, I just want to help you. I want to serve you and get you to where you want to go, right? I'm not trying to get you from A to Z. I just need to help you to get to your next step. And if I can help you do that, man, it's going to be amazing. And you'll see that you'll be up and running after those first couple of steps. If you are ready to take that next step, then head on over to reconstruct.brandonhanley.com and pick a time. There's a few Pines hostels available. If you don't find something that meets your timeline, reach out to me via email, brandon@fatherhoodfortherestofus.com, and let's have that conversation. We'll see if it's a good fit. I want to help you get to the level that you want to get to. Wally Carmichael had a great one, because he and I, when we were done with our conversation, it was a really, really enjoyable one. I said to him, Wally, you ever feel like, that there's too many of us out there, right? That
Right.
Or maybe I'm not in the right place. And he goes, yeah, man, and he addressed it as the imposter syndrome. And then what he did, though, was he gave this view. He said, imagine like you're on a basketball team, or maybe you're in the NBA, right? and all you guys are trying to get in there and you're trying to do it, and there's a bunch of you around, and all you see all the time are basketball players because that's just where you happen to be. And there you are down there on the court, and there's all these basketball players, but then you look up and there's the crowd. There's everybody else out there who's coming to see you. There's everybody else out there who's coming. There's so many people out there that there's no way that one team, that one individual can service them all. And there's no way, you always hear that if you're in sales, people buy from you because they know, like, and trust you.
Right.
And it's not even that you're really trying to sell something. It's just really trying to be of service. And that's a big shift in paradigm for myself in this past year. I know that you mentioned that, you got into this not necessarily to make money. I kind of did, but the idea,
that's okay too, though.
But the idea was, it's really been a lot more like any movie or comedy or anything like that, where you go in with all these intentions and then you turn out to, and it just kind of flips around on itself, and it's like, oh my God, I do have a heart, and that type of thing. I always say that throughout this past year, my heart grew 2 sizes too large, like the Grinch. And the more I embrace the servant's heart, the more I see that what I'm doing is and yourself as well, and all of us in this area, in this space, as a service to other men, to say, hey, dude, you don't have to keep fighting it alone. You don't have to go at it alone. There's ways that you don't have to struggle. And that's just kind of what we're doing here. So I appreciate you also just kind of throwing that out there.
No, and I'll say to that real quick. Anybody who's listening, your ability to do this from a livelihood standpoint, if anything, people should be encouraged by that's what you want to do. That means you're that much more dedicated. If this is what you're doing on a day-to-day, 24/7, 365, that means you are truly serving, committed to this. And we just don't have the ability in this country to just do that, and have no ability to provide for ourselves just on the day-to-day. So this idea that, because then it gets in that whole thing about, oh, you're just trying to sell something. Well, everybody's trying to sell something on some level. But I'd rather you try to sell me on being a better father than trying to sell me a valve or a kitchen sink. Especially if you have a heart and a passion for it, you're going to serve people ultimately better. And like you said, and I think there's a reason you're experiencing that. I think it's because your intentions are true. I think it's because what your product is worthwhile and it's making a difference. You should, on some level, get a reward for that. And I know that gets a little bit.
It's definitely a tough space to be in, because all you want to do is help, but you still got to eat, type of thing.
So don't be mad about it. People shouldn't be mad at you for that.
Yeah. I'm not. Again, it's definitely from the heart, and I think one of the things, I know this, I'm interviewing you, but just in conversation, is that you want to make sure that the audio and the video match up, right, that are in sync. Right. So anything that I start saying, anything that I'm portraying, the things that I'm doing and acting, these are actually who I become. And that's really been a great part of this process of doing the podcast and taking these steps forward. Sorry to segue. Sorry to transition like that, but or just kind of go off on a tangent like that. I feel like you and I really could go all day doing this, for sure. But we got a couple more questions. I'm gonna lob over at you, and then we'll get back to whatever the rest of our day calls for there, Sean.
Sounds good.
So one of the other ones I like to ask is, parenting books, or is there a fatherhood book or a book that outside of the Bible that you point most people to when it comes to parenting?
For, I think, Wild at Heart is the book. I'm trying to remember that. I'm looking it up right now. Wild at Heart, John Eldridge.
Okay.
That's a good one as a man from just a male perspective. In terms of understanding, it's a great book in terms of having that dichotomy behind that wild side of us that wants to run around and run through the forest and hunt. For most people, or at least just that wild side, whatever that wild side may be.
Sure.
And listening to that, it's a great introspective book. It was for me for a long time. As far as just parenting in general, I don't really have too many books in that sense that I would feel like I should recommend. I would do a little bit more. I would find a couple if you and your wife, or you and your person that you mother your child, if there's a couple you trust that you've seen go through things, you've seen, and you want to learn from them, I would encourage, go to lunch with them, go to dinner with them, sit down and talk to them, and just compare notes and see what they have to say, and use their knowledge for your benefit.
That's a great one. That's a great one. You know what? I think I actually like the question you asked. What is a book that you've read recently that's had a profound impact?
Oh yeah, probably that Evan Alexander book, Proof of Heaven. That's the one that I read not too long ago. That that was a tremendous book that had a big impact on me. And just in terms of just kind of jumbling up that whole idea of what we know from a reality standpoint.
Okay,
that was a great book.
Okay, cool. I like that. And then finally, if there's one thing, 10 years goes by, 10 years down the road, and you're looking back and you say, I want to thank my children for what would you like to thank your children for?
For allowing me to make mistakes and not holding it against me. I hope, and if I can minimize my screw ups and things. When I've lost my temper, I've lost my ability to put reason into a situation. If I can just know that didn't go too far, and we can laugh about it a little bit, or even it didn't do damage that's permanent. That's when I'll be the most thankful if they can tell me that.
Nice. I like that. Where before we get there, anything else? I know we could probably do this for 24 hours straight. But is there anything else that you want to touch on before we hop off?
No. I think just thank you for doing this podcast. I think if what you're doing, if your listeners are out there and it's resonating with you, I would say a little bit about what he said. There's so many things out there from an information standpoint. I'm a big podcast fan. Become a big podcast fan, not just from an industry standpoint, but there's so many podcasts that are out there that give you different bits of information to help you. But I think if you're looking for something, a new information source, you're tired of Fox News and CNN or just the same stories over and over again, there are a lot of people out there who have a lot of good things that are worth listening to say that can help you become the best person that you're out there. And there's not just one. And I think that's the brilliance of it. And that's the beauty of it. Listen to yours, listen to Wally's, listen to anybody's that's out there, and take a piece from those, and you can find nuggets out there that'll help improve your life. I do believe that. Absolutely.
Definitely, Sean. And so where can people go to find your podcast?
The ComeToTheTablePodcast.com is our website. We have all the episodes are listed there. We have links to we're on iTunes and Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. You can actually YouTube the episode straight from the website as well if you don't have any of that and you just want to listen that way. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're out there. And Sean at the ComeToTheTablePodcast.com is my email. Reach out to me, even if it's just a general question or anything. I think that connection is important, and I'd love to get feedback and all that kind of good stuff. Mm-hmm.
Awesome, Sean. Well, thanks for being on today. Thanks for doing what you're doing. Like I said, it gave me courage. So I know that it's given.